Bonjour à tous. C'est la saison du pain d'épices. The French pain d'épices is translated as spice bread. It is a yeast-free, dense, quick bread that is a little reminiscent of gingerbread, but not. It's sort of a cross between a bread and a cake. What makes this bread unique from other spice breads is in the rye flour and 1 full cup of honey. Talk about density. I can't wait to share my version of pain d'épices with you today. Pain d'épices recipes vary throughout the different regions in France. The original base of a pain d'épices recipe included rye flour, honey, and of course spices. Years later, milk and egg were added along with different flours and sugars. The recipe I'm sharing with you today brings it all together into a great tasting bread with hints of flavors from the many different French regions. This bread, while eaten throughout the year, is highly enjoyed during the holidays. In fact, it's quite nostalgic for many French adults as it reminds them of their childhood days eating it as a snack after school. You could serve it warm with a smear of butter or eat it with jam or cream cheese. Pas de règle, amusez-vous cette saison. An interesting fact about this bread is that it started out as a sourdough bread. Rye flour and honey were left to ferment to create the sourdough used to make the bread. Today, though, there's no waiting days or weeks for this bread. We can eat it in an hour and a half. What are we waiting for? Let's get to the recipe. For the ingredients, you'll need milk, granulated sugar, a good quality honey, butter, large egg, all-purpose flour, dark rye flour, baking soda, cinnamon, ground ginger, cloves, nutmeg, cracked black pepper, salt, orange zest, crystallized ginger, which is optional. Woo! I know that's a lot of ingredients. Most of them are spices, but they all blend well together to create a fantastically beautiful bread. So since this is a quick bread, go ahead and preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And then you're going to need a 9 by 5 inch loaf pan, nothing smaller than that. So line your pan with parchment paper with overhanging sides because this is what's going to help us lift the bread out of the pan. There are going to be 4 cups of flour in this loaf pan here. So it's going to be an above the rim bread, but it will be beautiful. To begin, we need to heat up the liquid and sweeteners. So in a medium saucepan, you're going to stir together 1 cup of milk. To that, we're going to add 1/2 cup of sugar, regular granulated sugar. I'm going to spray my measuring cup with cooking spray to make the honey easy to come out. To that, we're going to add our 1 cup of honey, which is 12 ounces. It's a lot of honey in this recipe. And then we're going to add 2 ounces of butter, and I diced mine up just to make it easier to melt. So all we're going to do is heat this together on low to medium over on a stove. It'll just take a few minutes. You just want the butter melted and the sugar dissolved. That's it. Our liquid honey mixture is ready. All the sugar is melted and the butter is melted. So we're just going to set it aside for the moment and let it cool. Now for this recipe, it's best to have a mise en place of your spices, meaning you have everything measured out before beginning since we have so many. In a large bowl, we're going to sift together 360 grams of all-purpose flour, and that's the same as 3 cups. To that, we're going to add 127 grams of dark rye flour. We'll set that down for a bit. Now, this is where we have all the other stuff we have to add in. We're going to add 2½ teaspoons of baking soda, 1½ teaspoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ground ginger, and we're going to add crystallized ginger in this, or else I probably would add 1½ teaspoons, but I want that crystallized ginger for that candy flavoring and chewiness in the bread. We're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of cloves, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg that I ground from the actual nut, 1/4 teaspoon of cracked black pepper. For a spice like a ginger cookie or molasses cookie, I love to add black pepper. It just elevates the spice to just a different level than if you don't have it. And then we're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now we're going to sift it all into the same bowl. I have some spices and salt that remain in my sifter. I'm actually going to put those in because I don't want the flavor to not be in my bowl here. And it's going to be mixed up anyway. You just want majority of the ingredients to be well combined. So that's why we're sifting it, and we want it to be light. Whisk in 1 tablespoon of orange zest, or just 1 full orange. That's what I did. I had 1 large navel orange, and I just zested the whole thing. If you aren't sure how to zest, see my video on zesting. I've got an entire video on showing how to zest. And then we're going to add 1/3 cup of crystallized ginger. And I chopped mine up. You should be able to see them in the bread, but I don't want them in huge chunks because crystallized ginger, it's candied ginger is what it is, but it has a pretty strong flavor. So if you're not a fan of ginger, particularly crystallized ginger, you don't have to add that to this recipe, but I love crystallized ginger. And then just whisk it up. Crystallized ginger has lots of health benefits too, particularly if you have a stomach ache, then just gnaw on the crystallized ginger. It's eating candy and it helps you feel better too. Go figure. Take your heated milk mixture that has cooled, and you're going to need to put this in a separate bowl. And the reason for that is because we are about to add the flour mixture in this bowl, and I don't really want to mix in my saucepan. We're going to whisk in 1 egg into the milk mixture. Take your dry mixture and add in sections about 1/3 of it at first. Use a whisk and whisk it in. Once the mixture becomes stiff from adding the flour, then just switch to a spatula. Okay, and add the rest of your flour. Okay, notice how thick our batter is. Make sure that you use that spatula and get all of the flour mixed in. Check the bottom, make sure you have no flour left at the bottom. And this is definitely a thicker than a cake. I mean, this is certainly going to be a bread. There's no doubt about it. I can smell that orange. I can smell all those spices. I can see the chunks of crystallized ginger. Oh, this is going to be a fabulous bread. Okay, once you have it all mixed up, you're going to take your pan, 9 by 5 inch with parchment paper in it. You likely will have creases in your bread from the parchment paper, so you might want to kind of flatten out those pieces that are curled or folded. All right, it's about as good as we're going to get it. And then we're just going to drop spoonfuls onto the paper because it'll just help weigh it down before we add in at all. Now you may be tempted to want to make 2 loaves because of all the dough. You certainly could do that, but I would not use 2 9 by 5 inch loaf pans because you're going to have a really small loaf of bread. You could do 2 smaller loaf pans and just cook them at less time than what we're going to today. Since this batter is so sticky, because the honey is so sticky, if you have any sections that are sticking up, just wet your fingers and then just dab the top of the loaf to smooth it out. Okay, now it's ready for the oven. Place your pain de piece in the oven on the center rack. Set your timer for 45 minutes. Take a piece of foil, tint it, and place it over the bread. Set the timer for another 15 minutes. At the 1 hour total mark, check to see that your bread is done. Just use a toothpick. If it comes out clean, it's ready. If not, then leave it in the oven. But all ovens are different, so start checking at 1 hour. Bread just came out of the oven. Take a look. Isn't it gorgeous? I said it was going to be above the rim. It's definitely above the rim. So now we just need to let it cool in its pan for 10 minutes, and then we'll take it out and let it cool completely and cut into it. Holding onto the parchment paper, just lift the bread out of the pan, and we're going to let it cool completely on a wire rack before we slice into it. Ideally, let the bread sit wrapped at room temperature for at least a day, up to 3 or 4, before slicing and eating. This bread is best after it sits at room temperature for a couple of days because it allows time for the spices to develop, meld, and the bread to become dense. Okay, let's check out our beautiful loaf of bread. This is a tall bread. If we measure it from the tip top, it's about 5 inches tall. I love that the cracks on the top, they're beautiful. That looks like a quick bread. Let's see what the center looks like. Ooh, crystallized ginger kind of dispersed throughout. Looks nice. This is a dense bread. It has rye and all that honey in it, so it's not going to be super light and fluffy. Well, it's time for a taste. Thanks for joining us, Scott.
You're welcome.
It's another day full of holiday spices. Are you tired of it yet?
Not yet.
I hope not. We still have a little bit of time. Well, for our guests out there, would you mind giving this French pain de piece, which is a spice bread, a taste and describing it for us? So while he's giving it a taste, this gingerbread, like cake / bread, is full of holiday spices with honey as the main sweetener and rye as not the primary flour, but a significant part of the flour in the bread. And it's what gives it the density that it is, because it is a pretty dense bread. Well, so what do you think?
It's definitely a dense bread. I didn't think of rye leading to that density, but that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, because it's the whole rye. So the whole kernel is ground down and it's coarse. And then the honey is, it's heavy and it provides a lot of moisture.
The honey sweetener doesn't really come forward that much. It's definitely can taste the ginger, and I guess that would be from the crystal.
Probably because it's crystallized candied ginger in it. How do you feel about the chunk of the ginger?
I like it. I like that. It's a little different. Kind of makes this one a little bit unique.
Mm-hmm. Can you differentiate this from gingerbread? I mean, you just said the ginger chunks. Do you think that's primary difference?
Well, with gingerbread, to me, it seems like the density of this is different. This is a little bit more cakey.
Okay, which is what it should be.
Whereas gingerbread, I think of the gingerbread making kits that definitely have to be very dense.
Right.
For that, and this is not like that.
Okay. Well, good. So you described it the way it's meant to be described. So perfect.
Okay.
Awesome.
Extra points for that?
Yeah, extra points for that. Thanks for participating.
Anytime.
Your parting gift is a loaf of spice cake.
Okay, great.
Well, merci tout le monde. If you're looking for a different take on gingerbread, you might want to give this one a try. They are great for making ahead of time and storing before gifting. Eat it for breakfast, snack, or dessert. Thanks for watching. We wish you and yours a happy holiday season. Bonne fête de fin d'année. Jusqu'à la prochaine fois, allez faire cuire la cuisine du monde.